In this video, we're going to discuss the concept of aromaticity in detail. We're also going to tackle a number of questions determining whether a compound is aromatic or is not. So, to start with, what are the rules and conditions which a compound has to adhere to for it to be aromatic? Number one, the compound has to be cyclic. All aromatic compounds are cyclic. There are no straight chains. All of them, they are cyclic. And that cyclic compound, it has to be conjugated, meaning that it should have alternating double bonds, like double single right around the compound. And every atom in the ring, which is in the backbone of the ring, it has to be sp2 hybridized. So if only one atom fails to be sp2 hybridized, which is in the backbone of the ring, then the whole compound is disqualified from group aromatic. Also, all aromatic compounds have plain 2D structures. So if the structure is twisted somewhere or is now in three-dimensional, then the compound is no longer aromatic at all. Aromatic compounds also have what we call HUCKEL'S number of pi electrons, which is 4n plus 2 pi electrons, meaning that all aromatic compounds should have 4n plus 2 pi electrons, where n is a positive integer, like 0, 1, 2, 3, going forward. So meaning that if you come across a compound maybe with 9 or 8 pi electrons, then that compound is definitely not an aromatic compound. Another fact about aromatic compounds is that they are quite stable, and benzene do prove that very well. Okay, what if you come across a compound which is cyclic and it is conjugated? It does have those alternating double bonds, and every atom making up the ring is sp2 hybridized. Then it also have those flat 2D structures. But instead of having 4n plus 2 pi electrons, it has 4n pi electrons, meaning that the number of pi electrons will be now multiples of 4, like 4, 8, 12, 16. What would such a compound be like? But one thing for sure, that compound would be very, very unstable, and we refer to such compounds as anti-aromatic compounds. Okay, so before we go through some examples here, let's just try to help some of us who might have skipped a lecture on hybridization. So if we want to know the hybridization of an atom in a compound, we have to look at the number of groups or atoms bonded to the central atom or bonded to the atom of consideration. But to make things a little bit easy, we'll count the number of bonds around that atom of consideration. So if it is bonded to two groups, it will be sp hybridized, like in the case of carbon dioxide. If we count, we count double bond as 1. So in the case of carbon dioxide, we'll be having 1 there and another 1. So it will be sp hybridized. But if it is bonded to 3 groups, then it will be sp2 hybridized. So we'll take ethene as our example. We'll look at that carbon there. So we'll count the double bond 1, then the bond between carbon and nitrogen 2, and the other bond between carbon and nitrogen 3. So that would be sp3, sp2 hybridized, I mean. But if it is bonded to 4 groups, it will be now sp3 hybridized, and our example in this case would be methane. So in case of methane, we'll look at that carbon there. So to know the hybridization, or to tell the hybridization of that carbon there, we'll count the number of bonds around it. So having 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that would be sp3 hybridized. So here we're just counting the number of bonds from the central atom or from the atom of consideration. But in some ions, we happen to count a pair of electrons towards hybridization. We'll see that in some of our examples below. But the basic rule to understand this, when we are counting the number of groups, or we are counting the groups in an ion, then we count a pair of electrons lastly. So if we count that pair of electrons as the last third group, we'll count it towards hybridization. But if we count it as the last fourth group, then we'll treat it as a pair of pi electrons. Okay, so let me show you what I mean about that. I'm going to use some heterocyclic compounds. So if I bring pyrrolidine, then we try to count the number of groups around that nitrogen there. We'll count 1 from that single bond, 2 from that other single bond, and 3 with hydrogen there. So when I'm coming to this pair of electrons, I count them as the last fourth group. So I'll treat them as pi electrons. I won't count them towards hybridization. So meaning that pyrrolidine have 2 pi electrons, but because those carbons there, they are sp3 hybridized, then pyrrolidine won't be aromatic. But when we bring quinoline and we try to count the number of groups around that nitrogen and quinoline there, we'll be having 1 at that double bond, 2 coming from this single bond. But when we're going to those electrons, we count them as the last third group. So we'll be treating them as the third bond around that nitrogen. So if we were to count the number of electrons around that nitrogen, it would be now 1, 2, and 3 with those electrons. So we count them towards hybridization, meaning that our nitrogen will be now sp2 hybridized and allowing quinoline to be aromatic. Okay, further examples. I have cyclohexa 1,3-diene there. Is this aromatic or is not? I think this is quite easy because I only have 4 pi electrons there. One double bond represents 2 pi electrons. So if I'm having 2 double bonds, it means I'm having 2 times 2 pi electrons. That would be 4 pi electrons. And this compound is not conjugated at all. And those 2 carbons there, they are sp3 hybridized, meaning that cyclohexa 1,3-diene is not aromatic. What about pyrrole? If I bring pyrrole, then I have to figure out whether I'm going to count those lone pair of electrons on that nitrogen there towards hybridization, or I'm going to treat them as pi electrons. So let's go on and count the number of groups around that nitrogen. So I'll be having 1 coming from this bond and 2 from that other bond, 3 is hydrogen there. So meaning that those electrons will be my 4th group. So as we said, when we count the electrons as the last 4th group, we will treat them as pi electrons. So we count them as the pi electrons, meaning that my pyrrole will be now having 6 pi electrons, and therefore it will be aromatic. What about benzene? Benzene is quite easy. On my view, this is the simplest aromatic compound of them all. It is conjugated, it is planar, so benzene is aromatic. No questions on that. Here are some more examples. Be free to pause the video and just try to figure them out, which ones will be not aromatic, which ones will be aromatic, and which ones will be anti-aromatic if we have any. Okay, so we're going to start with that compound there. We can see it is cyclic, it is conjugated, yes. So now we have to figure out whether all atoms are sp2 hybridized in that ring. So we have to count the number of groups around those nitrogen atoms and see whether we're going to count those electrons towards hybridization or we're going to treat them as pi electrons. But I can see that in both cases we're going to count the electrons as the last third groups, meaning that we'll count them towards hybridization. If we count them towards hybridization, it means both our nitrogen atoms will be sp2 hybridized. So if those nitrogen atoms are sp2 hybridized, our compound will be having 6 pi electrons and every atom will be sp2 hybridized. So it is aromatic. What about cyclohepta 1,3,5-triene? Will this be aromatic or it will be anti-aromatic? This one is quite easy because we have a carbon atom there which is sp3 hybridized. So the compound is ruled out, it's not aromatic. Then what about pyridine? We have to count the number of groups around that nitrogen and see with those electrons counted towards hybridization or will be treated as pi electrons. So if we try to count there, we say 1, 2, and the pi electrons will be rated as the last third group. So we'll treat them, we'll count them towards hybridization. So our nitrogen will be sp2 hybridized. So pyridine is aromatic. Then we have cyclopropanyl anion. Yeah, this one is a little bit challenging. But if we try to count the number of pi electrons there, we are having 2 from the double bond and 2 which are lone pairs there. And this compound is conjugated. It doesn't seem so conjugated, but it's conjugated because those electrons in the double bond then they can easily flow around the compound. So that compound will be conjugated. But because it is 4 pi electrons, then cyclopropanyl anion will be anti-aromatic. Thank you very much for watching. Let's meet in our next tutorial.